everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Today we are continuing on in our coverage of the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni lawsuit that has been flooding the media since it began. It's clear that there's a lot of toxic dynamics at play, and recently Blake Lively made a request that only furthered the vibes that she is the toxic one in this situation, which is really unfortunate. Blake Lively basically has gotten herself into a pickle. She's launched these lawsuits and released this to the New York Times ahead of time, sort of sabotaged herself because she got herself into this pickle where she made these big accusations that were very damaging to Justin Baldoni's reputation, both professionally and personally. On top of it, stress levels, sending them through the roof. But in her legal filings, she is lacking huge amounts of receipts and evidence and proof and direction of specifically what is going on. Recently, she filed a subpoena to get all of Justin Baldoni's phone records dating back to 2022, every single possible phone record. It didn't matter who he was talking to or what it was about. She thought she needed to have it to take a look. And this feels like fishing. Like you're just trying to get all the information so that you can look for any possible problems or any possible thing that could be used against Justin, that could be used in your case, and defend yourself, rather than knowing exactly what you're after as this is what I'm talking about and this is what I need. And this is just reflecting poorly on Blake, because if she was harassed and felt there was retaliation and a smear campaign, then she would have a pretty good idea of exactly what would be relevant to that. She would know and have a pretty narrow scope of exactly what the problems were and what was done wrong, and be able to file a subpoena that reflected that was specific to those things. But instead, she's like, I want all the information for a 2-year chunk of time, everything, so that I can then find things and cherry pick things that I can use in my case. That's what it seems like. And here is what the judge said. Court documents that were released at the very end of February, Judge Lehman issued a mixed ruling saying that the subpoena from Lively's legal team for communications from Baldoni and his production company Wayfarer Studios dating back to 2022 was overly intrusive and disproportionate to the needs of the case. Lively has identified no means to segregate those numbers that may have some relevance to her case from those numbers that would have no relevance and would reveal sensitive personal information, which notes that in Lively's initial complaint against Baldoni alleging harassment retaliatory smear campaign, she claimed the negative campaign began in August 2024. So what he's saying here is that if you're Blake Lively and you're claiming that the smear campaign and the problems began in August 2024, why would you need every single phone conversation and record dating back to 2022? That's way too intense and way too far-reaching. Baldoni has denied all these allegations and responded in January by countersuing Lively, Ryan Reynolds, their publicist, and the New York Times in a suit that alleged defamation and extortion. His attorneys said that Lively has not provided any basis for asserting an interest in the communications of non-parties. This means that Lively may make discovery requests tailored to the actual allegations she has against him, that she already identified in the alleged negative media campaign. In a statement shared with People, Baldoni's lawyer Brian Friedman said that the judge put a stop to the actress-producer's egregious attempt to invade our client's privacy, and this is a big win. No matter how the Lively parties may try to spin this decision, the court saw their efforts for what they really are, a desperate fishing expedition intended to salvage their debunked claims long after they already savaged our clients' reputations in the New York Times. A spokesperson for Lively also responded to the ruling in a statement that says, "What is Brian Friedman hiding?" After promising to release all the receipts, Friedman ran into court to keep secret the phone records of who Baldoni and his associates were calling during their retaliatory campaign. Instead of getting these records from the phone carriers the way we initially requested, the judge has ruled that if we simply submit more specific requests, we will be able to get the records we are seeking. Today, we will do that. We are submitting those requests directly to the defendants involved, and we look forward to seeing the records. Well, this sounds really petty and ridiculous. And this is part of why it's best to not get yourself into these sorts of situations publicly and go through these sorts of things publicly, because both sides do end up at times coming across as really, really petty. But the truth of the matter is that Baldoni had all this publicity against him with the New York Times article and lost a lot of jobs and connections and supporters and things like that, because people just back away when something like that happens. We've seen it time and time again with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, for example. Johnny had Disney back away, and ever since the ruling came out that Amber Heard manipulated the situation and lied, and Johnny Depp won his court cases, Disney has been begging him to come back, and he won't, because that hurt his feelings, and rightfully so. It's unfortunate and sad for us all. So the same thing has happened to Justin. Jobs fell through, connections fell through, people abandoned him because they're like, well, I just can't have this sort of connection right now for my career. And surely Justin, part of him can understand why. But because of all of this, he and his lawyer have published the text messages and communications between him and Lively to the internet to show people and let people make up their mind for themselves to see that Blake Lively has mischaracterized a lot of this stuff, like a lot. And she has flat out lied about certain things already. It's plain to see. When he said that he was going to release all these communications to the public, because that was really his only move he could make to show people, like, look at the evidence for yourself, because he already had big hitters out against him. The New York Times, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are big names and big deals, and there was lots of eyeballs on that sensationalist article. So in an attempt to try to show people the truth, he came forth with all these communications. And Blake Lively's team is the one who tried to put a stop to that. They didn't want all those messages released. And in part because they had edited and doctored the messages that they gave to the New York Times. And now they're trying to say that the opposite has happened, that Baldoni's team is the one trying to get less exposed, but that's just not the case. Justin Baldoni's team is just saying you can have communications that are relevant, sure, but there's no need for you to have all personal communications. Privacy is still expected in your private life and in a situation that's not connected to any of this. And so Blake's lawyer's statement that, yeah, well, we're going to submit more specific requests and we're doing that today and we look forward to getting the information, and it's just petty. It's just petty and ridiculous, and it's not acknowledging any of it. But the public is reacting again in favor of Baldoni. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have really stepped in big time with all of this nonsense and are continuing to turn the tides against them. Same thing we saw happen with Amber Heard and Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, quite frankly, that you make these allegations that are not fully true, you manipulate the truth, you mischaracterize statements, and you do it very, very publicly, that you're a victim of these things, but you lack the evidence and you're lying about certain things, whether or not you had some stuff happen that was not right or not fair. If you lie about some things and you mischaracterize some things and you take certain things out of context and you're cherry picking this and that and the other thing to make it look more like you're a victim of something, to accuse another party with no evidence, and you're manipulating it, then immediately the public will find out. This day and age, people find out everything, and then forevermore, the whole rest of the case, people are going to default to thinking you're lying. Same thing with Harry and Meghan. People default to thinking that they're lying, exaggerating, blowing it out of proportion, mischaracterizing, stirring up dust over nothing, being big babies, liars, etc. Amber Heard, every single thing. Even if she had times where she was treated unfairly, they're like, yeah, but you also lied, you did this, you did that, you did all these other things wrong, so you don't really have any ground to stand on. That's what Ryan and Blake have found themselves in, that same dynamic of, well, you've lied, you've mischaracterized, you edited the messages that you included in the New York Times piece, you've done all this manipulating, so nobody's going to believe you from this point forward. You're going to really have to bring forth hardcore evidence to support your claims if you're going to have any chance of salvaging your reputation and this case. This commentator says, Blake and Ryan have made a mockery of DV and harassment. What an insult to actual victims. Survivors are watching, and I'm not being paid by the Baldoni PR team and not a bot. Actions have consequences and truth matters. Here we go again. Lively's team trying to spin. They don't get it. Every time they try to mislead the public, the less and less we believe her. It was Lively who went running to court to stop Friedman when he was going to release all the text messages on the website. And that was because Blake had edited the text messages that she provided to the New York Times as justification for her lawsuit. She removed emojis that she included because it made her seem more friendly in the text messages, and she didn't want that interpretation to be out there in the New York Times. So she edited it, and that was a big mistake. Baldoni has no issue with Lively getting access to relevant records. He's just saying she doesn't need records from his vet, roof guy, landscaper, etc. Not hiding, just seeking fairness. And again, both sides are looking pretty petty, but it seems the commentators are very much on Baldoni's side at this particular juncture, with Tiffany saying, I'm tired of hearing about both of them. This trial needs to happen and be done because these two are ridiculous in the press. This last issue for phone records is just too much. These types of things are exactly what makes it seem petty. Sabrina has a good point as well. Smear campaign, funny because it's just what she initiated when this whole thing began. However subtly, things like Justin being unfollowed on social media by her and several of the cast and then being banned from appearing with everyone else at the premiere. It was his film. You didn't think people would notice. Though it wasn't publicly said then as to why all that occurred, should it have been the other way around, she would have felt her reputation was being smeared without evidence of any wrongdoing on her part, but it was his. What's happened now, with the public sentiment turning against her, was just Justin defending himself and her behavior on its own. Exactly. Her editing of the text messages, her releasing this to New York Times before the court filing, her manipulating and mischaracterizing the situations and the dynamics, and basically lying. I'm not saying that Blake has completely lied and made this entire thing up, but she has done enough untrustworthy things so far early on in this situation that it makes it illogical to assume she's being honest about the whole thing and pick sides, because she has lied and mischaracterized, and so far we don't have any evidence of Justin lying or mischaracterizing anything. She's always been insufferable and her ego is now on full display. Hope her dragons/monsters are there for her. I see this settling with a perfunctory statement from both parties stating it's in the best interest of both parties. Maybe, but that wouldn't really do Justin Baldoni any justice. She has really gone after him hard, and he already was a smaller name in Hollywood than Reynolds and Lively. Not in a bad way, just, they were a Hollywood it couple up until now. Now things are really up in the air for them. And so Baldoni was kind of the underdog in this situation. And I think the consensus is that she's steamrolled this whole situation. The other update to this case that I would like to discuss here is to do with Jenny Slate. She rented an apartment in New York City for the duration of filming, and she had a young child, maybe a toddler or a baby at the time. And she had been talking to a Wayfarer Studios rep and told them she didn't really like the place, but she put in this big deposit and she didn't want to lose the deposit, which she would have to do if she wanted to move. And they said, we will refund you that deposit. Go and get a place that you're comfortable in. And whoever it was that she was talking to, was saying that it's really important for you as a mom to have a place that you're comfortable in and feel safe in. That's, exactly what you need while you're filming, which makes sense. Actors need to be able to really be mentally and emotionally prepared for filming. And so it's important and pivotal, really, that they are satisfied with their accommodations so that they can feel comfortable, get good rest, be on their A game when they are filming, because it's very expensive every time you shoot. And so you don't want to have somebody just not performing well and having to do reshoots all the time, or having to do so many more takes than necessary because they're tired or not happy or just having stuff going on with their accommodations. That's an easy fix to help out and stack the odds in favor of getting good performances out of your actors. So that makes sense. Apparently, during the conversation, the person said something about protecting the sanctity of motherhood, that he was yeah, we're totally down to take care of this $15,000 deposit that you made, refund it for you so that you don't have money as a hurdle to get across to getting a comfortable space rented out for filming. And she was uncomfortable with this for some reason, which I don't really get. I don't understand why somebody would be sensitive about that phrase necessarily. I think that it's nice to have some normalcy surrounding the intensity of motherhood and babies and toddlers and young children in particular, because those 0 to 5 age, and I would argue even beyond that, it is such a vulnerable time really for the mom and the babies or children, because they're so helpless and require so much support and engagement from the parents, including the mother in this situation, that I think it's weird for that to be a problem. And for that to be offensive in any way. In fact, I appreciate hearing that there are people out there who get that, because so many people don't really get it, because culturally in society, there is so much more normalcy and acceptance around, well, you just chuck your kids in daycare, you go to work all day, you see them in the evenings. There's still normalcy around, like, yeah, you should turn off your devices and have one-on-one time and quality time with your kids and, eat dinner together every night and stuff like that. But there's also normalcy against a completely contradictory idea of, just send your kids to daycares and preschools all day long. And that's robbing so much from that dynamic and that relationship. And so I actually think it was refreshing to hear that there was somebody in the studio approaching it from that sort of a thoughtful space. I think that that's something that should have been appreciated, not criticized. But what do you guys think about that? Was that maybe a clunky way to say that we want to make sure that you're comfortable? I mean, you are taking care of a kid at the same time. He could have said it differently. Or do you think it was fine? I'm interested to know your opinions. Thank you for joining me for today's update. I will be back with more content soon. Have a happy day, everybody. Bye.